appreciate your time and interest. And my name is John Gluck. I'm the editorial director of special projects at Medium, and I'm pleased and honored to be joined today by Roger Martin, who has had a highly distinguished career, both in business, both in academia and the private sector, as a thinker and author and teacher. And rather than go through a long preamble here, we don't have a ton of time. I'm going to start asking Roger questions more or less right away, and he can say a little bit more about his background as well. The only other note I would mention is we're going to try and have time for some questions and answers at the end, but I can't promise. So feel free to drop your questions in the allotted space. And if we have time for some of them, we will do our best to get to them. Anyway, thanks for joining us, Roger. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And as I said, I'm going to jump right in. So for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do now.
Sure. I have for many years been mainly a strategy advisor. I help CEOs and executive teams with strategy. I did it in the context of a company called Monitor Company that a bunch of us who worked with and around Mike Porter created in the early 80s. And I was one of the 4 people who kind of ran it for a decade in the 90s before I got talked into going back to my home country, Canada, to become Dean of the Rotman School of Management, which I did for 15 years with the goal of making sure Canada had one globally relevant business school, which we managed to accomplish. And since leaving academia, I'm back doing 2 things, really. Again, advising CEOs and executive teams on strategy, and then writing. And writing my Medium column has become one of the biggest parts of my writing life. But I write books. I've written 13 of them, and I've written 32 HBR articles, the most of anybody in the 21st century, as it turns out. So that's sort of what I do.
Excellent. Yeah, you gave me a perfect segue talking about Medium. Obviously, one of the things we want to talk about today is your experience on the platform and how what that's been like for you and what value it's had for you and for your followers and readers. So start from the beginning. Tell us how you got started on Medium and what the appeal of the platform was for you.
Sure. Well, I got started at the advice of the wonderful woman who helps do publicity for my books, Jessica Krakowski. And I had been doing, so I write a lot for HBR, the magazine, but also as you know, HBR.org. They have a series of blog authors. I was one of the main authors on that. I did 110 blog posts in the 10 years leading up to 2020, the summer of 2020. And I had a wonderful relationship with Sarah Green Carmichael, who was my original blog editor, and then a guy named Walter Frick, Walter Frick. He was terrific, but then they assigned me to a team of youngsters who sort of started randomly rejecting things I wrote. Actually, one of them sent me the submission guidelines after having been one of the most prolific authors there. I somehow needed to know the submission guidelines. So I was just complaining about this to Jessica, and Jessica said, "Well, have you tried Medium?" And I said, "No." And do you recommend it? And she said, "Yes." She said some of her other authors were on it, and so I just tried it, and it was kind of it's kind of a Wally Pipp kind of thing, if you So HBR.org kind of had a headache and took the day off, and I'm never going back. And I've since, I think, written 157 Medium posts. But really, the reason is I had a need to consider where I was going to do my online work, and Jessica made the suggestion, and there you go.
Do you remember what your first of those 157 or 8 posts was, what it was about?
Yes, it was habits, COVID, and strategy. And it was in the summer. It was I had sent it to the HBR.org folks, and they said, "Oh, that sounds interesting, but we're kind of backed up, and so I'll look at it in about a month." I was like, "It's COVID, right? People are trying to figure out COVID. I'm not waiting a month." And so that was the piece. I put it up, and people liked it, and I kind of liked the experience, because I mean I've been at it for long enough that I can write. They always call me at HBR. They refer to me as the unicorn, because lots of people have great ideas but can't write, and the editors because bash it into shape, or they can write but their ideas aren't all that great. So they say, you come with lots of ideas and you can write. And so I realized I didn't really need an editor for these shorter pieces. I love my HBR magazine editor, David Champion's fantastic. So for that longer form, things that take a year to get published, sometimes as many as 3 years through the cycle, that's fine. But on this, the fact that I don't need to have an editor, I can think about something, write it, put it up, is just perfect for me. Like it is just perfect for me.
No, that sounds great. So, obviously you mentioned those two things, the speed of being able to publish something quickly, especially if it's timely and topical, as your COVID piece was, and the need to, or the lack of a need to have an editor. Are there other things about the platform you've found particularly appealing, or, compared to other platforms you've been on, or tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and maybe I'm knock on wood. I hope I don't jinx myself here, but fewer wingnuts, right? Like the comments I get tend to be thoughtful comments. I don't get sort of massive sort of sectarian attacks because I've kind of used some word that somebody says must mean this or that. I really enjoy the comments. I like the stats. Again, for what it's worth, HBR.org doesn't give any. You have no idea how many people have read your piece. Nothing. Just nothing. I mean, I think it's silly, but it is what it is. And I follow my stats religiously because I try to write so that the audience is happy reading it. And I can tell, kind of some themes kind of people are more interested in than others. And I wouldn't know if I didn't have the stats kind of feedback. So I like this, that a lot. If you took away the stats from me now, I would be bereft. I would say, well, how am I going to know if this is a theme? I did one on strategy and leadership, and people really loved it. So I did a 4-part series, even though I didn't intend necessarily to do that at the front. But because of the reaction, I thought, oh, well, good. They like that. There's more to say on this topic. On some others that just they're fine, but no real excitement. I just say, well, I'm not going to return to that subject. I've said what I need to say, and there's not a huge demand for more of that.
You've given me another great segue. You're also a unicorn as an interviewee, I'm going to say, because you're making this incredibly easy for me. I meant talking about the stats. I was just going to ask you, you have almost 200,000 followers on the platform. How long did it take you to build that following? People might want to know. And,
sure.
Just that.
Yeah, just 3 years and a bit. So it was mid-July when I was given the option of waiting for a month to do my piece and put it up, I believe July 20th, something in the 20s. And so it's been, right, I guess it's 160 weeks and just under 200,000 followers. So it's sort of been growing at 1,000 a week or a little greater than 1,000 a week. And again, I don't know if you're supposed to. Like, I'm fairly naive on this. I don't know if you're supposed to do stuff to make it grow more. I don't. I just publish stuff, and it seems as though word of mouth causes another 1,000 or so to show up on a weekly basis. I don't know, John, what should I know more about how to do this?
Well, it's funny because once again, you anticipated my question. I was going to ask you, what do you think the secret is to building an audience on Medium? But you seem to not particularly. Well, talk a little bit about that, because you did say following, looking at your stats, maybe doubling down on things that do well, maybe not going back to the subjects that don't.
I think it's predictability, right?
Okay, that's interesting.
So I think people who have ideas and say, well, when I have an idea, I'll randomly write, I doubt are going to get big followership. People like habits, just like my first Medium piece. And I did 10 sort of on a set of subjects that you could call kind of random managerial things. Then I wrote one on playing to win, which is the book that people know me most for. It's a strategy model, and I co-wrote it with A.G. Lafley from P&G, and in it there's a model that has 5 boxes, and the book is least clear on the last box, management systems. It says you need to make 5 choices. Winning aspiration, where to play, how to win, capabilities, management systems. And so I wrote one on the role of management systems in strategy, and people just loved it. And so I said, well, that's interesting. That's further explication of playing to win. Maybe people want more of that. And so I did more of that. And then I realized that people really like this. And so the past 147, because Monday will be my 148th, are in the Playing to Win Practitioner Insights series. So I said, you want some insights as a practitioner on this model, and so I think in terms of building a followership, I think it helps me that they know they're going to get something on strategy, something on playing to win. And it's all sorts of things. It's aspects of that model, how you apply it to this or that, how it relates to other models like Clay Christensen's Jobs to Be Done, business model, Canvas, balanced scorecard. I do all sorts of things in and around it. But I think that helps, that they know that around 9 a.m. Eastern time on Monday, there is going to be a Playing to Win Practitioner Insight piece. It's going to be 6 to 8 minutes long by medium reader kind of measurement. That turns out to be 1,500 to 2,000 words for my stuff. I don't know the algorithm, but 6 to 8 minute piece in a series that they know what the series is about. And it'll be in my voice. And so they're, I think, used to a 6 to 8 minute piece in my voice. And so it's worth following, rather than somebody who might randomly have had a piece that they say, well, that's really cool. They may not follow the person because they say, I don't know if he or she is going to write again, when they're going to write, when I can expect it.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on this or bumped up against it anyway, but what about frequency or cadence, how often you post? What are your thoughts about that?
Again, I just got into this kind of once a week thing, which, by the way, is a fair amount of pressure. That's 1,500 to 2,000 words every week. I've written the equivalent. So my most famous book is Playing to Win, is 67,000 words, and Playing to Win Practitioner Insights series for the last 147 weeks has been 240,000 words. So it's over 3.5 books worth I've written over the past year. But I'm sort of chagrined at the idea of doing some other frequency, but it's conceivable that once every 2 weeks would be fine. I don't know. Kind of Maybe. Again, I'd ask John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you have it right across the board. I don't think there's any perfect frequency, but I do think predictability and regularity can help. On the other hand, there are people who, it depends on what your goals are. There are people who use Medium really happily and productively, writing 4 times a year if they have, or once a year if they just have one personal story. They're very, they feel very strongly about telling. It can, platform can be very valuable that way. That isn't necessarily the best way to build audience over time, but not everyone is interested in building audience over time. So one of the things that's great about Medium is a lot of different people can use it in a lot of different ways. But I think all that advice you have for those people who do want to build audience is great. Be somewhat predictable in what you're, pick a lane, be focused, post regularly. Doesn't have to be at the exact same minute on the exact same day, but that doesn't hurt. Those are all good ideas. So do you have a favorite post of the posts you've written on Medium? And if so, why? Or, what was the reaction to that made it one of your favorites?
Sure. It's probably my most read one. It's don't let OKRs masquerade as strategy. And it's just fun because there's a whole lot of people who kind of read John Doerr's book and think OKRs are the be all and end all and life revolves around them. And I Sorry, Roger, for anyone who doesn't know, just tell the audience what OKRs are. Probably objectives and key results. And it's a Silicon Valley thing practiced by like Google and others and written about by the great venture capitalist John Doerr. And so and I've just watched them in my practice, especially with my Silicon Valley clients, which I have a bunch of, is people sort of think that if I set an OKR, that somehow that makes it more likely to be achieved, right? So their product may not be good enough to sell what they want to sell, how much they want to sell, but just by having an OKR and then getting people to commit to OKRs and whatever, and it's like, no, that's not how the world works. How the world works is if you have a great product or service, then you'll sell lots of it. And if you don't, setting goals doesn't do anything for you other than provide discouragement and disappointment. So I just said they're useful, but don't let them substitute for strategy. And so a whole lot of OKR people were like, "Oh, you don't understand," and blah 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 blah. Though I think it must have resonated with enough to get the, I think, 80,000 views or something that it had. So it was fun. I like the ones that provoke people. Maybe my second favorite one was one where I said it's time to realize that marketing and strategy are the same thing. And there were so many people who were upset by that, but it's true, and I prefer to talk about things that are true.
Yeah. Do you deliberately set out? I mean, you mentioned enjoying, posting things that are provocative or thought-provoking. Do you deliberately set out to write about counterintuitive kinds of ideas, like forget OKRs, or is that just happen when it happens?
I think it would be one of the things that I do, right? So that is one of the things I've written. Many of my books are about just that. And my last book in 2022 is called A New Way to Think, that just explored 13 existing management models that I think are deeply flawed. And so part of what I think my contribution, I would like it to be, is helping people throw off the shackles of models that don't produce the results they were hoping they would produce, and adopt a different one. So a bunch of my posts on Medium would have that as the core structure. Here's the way the business world thinks about this. Mm-hmm. It doesn't produce the results they want. I'm not criticizing it doesn't produce what I want. They use it to try and produce this result, like pay for performance is one. They set up pay for performance systems because they want to have better performance by the company. Unfortunately, despite hundreds of millions of person hours being dedicated to setting up, auditing, carrying out pay for performance system. There is no evidence that pay for performance and entity performance, company performance or organization performance, there's any correlation between the two. None. Isn't that kind of amazing?
It is.
You'd think if you're going to spend hundreds of millions of person hours on this, that it would have show up in studies as, what? More pay for performance produces better performance. It doesn't. So what's that all about?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing I do a lot of.
So what are some of the ideas you're thinking about now, writing about on Medium, writing about for your next book, thinking about for, any of your outlets? Give us a little sneak peek into what's on your mind now.
Sure. Well, Monday is going to be on the multiplicity of strategy terms that are used, right? Commercial strategy, PR strategy, sourcing strategy, funding strategy. What does this all mean? Books, I've sort of got two queued up. One is on this I think very modern challenge, which is companies can scale. We were talking about Apple before we got on, $300 billion company. Companies can scale, people can't. You're about as big as you're ever going to be, and you're not going to get a whole lot bigger. Now your kids are probably 2 inches taller than you, but that's not really scaling. And so the way companies have dealt with scale has caused people to feel smaller and smaller and more insignificant in organizations, and that's creating problems. So it's a book about how do you scale without making people feel small. The next one after that, my wife and I are business partners, and we want to write a book about how to be business partners with your significant others and do it successfully, and look at a bunch of cases of that to try and intuit what makes that work versus not. And I'm kind of excited about that. And wherever we travel in the world, we're intrigued to find. We were just in Champagne, and there's a champagne maker and his wife, who's the branding. He's the champagne guy. She's the branding graphic artist, labels, all of that kind of stuff. And it's a great combo. So those both
sound fantastic. Yeah, the second idea in particular sounds like really, fun and original and different from most business books.
Good.
So,
I'm glad you think so. I will tell Marie Louise.
Yeah,
she will. She's really kind of keen on it, and it was her idea, not mine, but I've very much adopted it. But I'll give her credit. It was her thought.
Yeah, they both sound great. So you and I have talked in the past about the fact that you've gotten some consulting business clients from your Medium posts. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's had two positive impacts on that front. It was not my intent so much as I want to get my ideas out in the world. But I got a client. It was probably around this time last year, where head of strategy phones up and says, our CEO read a Medium post and said that we needed to talk to you about helping us with strategy. And that was worth $500,000. Kind of nice. But the other somewhat less obviously direct is I can't tell you how many clients. So I have I have all these followers, but I have a list of 250-ish kind of clients and friends and the like that I send them out to every Monday morning, and I email them the copy link, right? Email the link out to them. And I can't tell you how many CEOs will write me and say, "Loved that. That was really relevant to me. We should talk about that." Right? And so it's a vehicle for starting conversations, and there is no outbound marketing effort that could come anywhere close to the value of that. Like nothing. Like I could have a television ad campaign. I could sponsor a golf tournament. Well, you know, that would be ridiculous. But I could sponsor, you know, like Amex and all those guys sponsor golf tournaments. Would not be as effective as having a CEO phone you up and say, or send you an email saying, "Hey, Roger, that column you wrote was really interesting, and that's really relevant to us. Can we discuss it?"
Yeah, our CEO, Tony Stubblebine, likes to say our content is our marketing, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're touching on there.
Totally. If that's what he says, I agree entirely. No, I agree entirely with him. And so I like almost don't do anything other than produce content on Medium, make sure it gets to them. So this mailing list has been a good, and I'd recommend it to anybody, you know, having people sort of get it on that more personal basis. But that's kind of all I do. And people call me up to talk about the content. And I can't, like, it just happens, and I'm at a client, and they'll be saying, "Hey, Roger, you know, this week's was really interesting. Tell us a little bit more, kind of about that." So it's just a great, meaningful content conversation starter. And as I think about it and ask myself, how could that happen equally effectively another way? My answer is, the hell if I know, right? Like I actually can't think about it. I mean, one thing to do would be is to write a super best-selling book, but that's not easy. Another is to write an HBR article, but you know, HBR has got great circulation, great, you know, it's the premier magazine in its field. But I tell you, I did not get traction on that vehicle until I'd probably published 10 of them. Mm-hmm. Right, I've published 32 now, but it probably took that long. And you know how many people publish 10 HBR articles in their lifetime?
Right,
probably 100 in history, number, yep. maybe 50 in history, in the history. So for me, the Medium thing is terrific, and I don't even think about it much, John. I've got a rhythm. I just write them, and then I expect people will ask and make comments on them, and good things will happen.
I like it. So we only have a couple of minutes left. It doesn't look like we're going to have time for questions. I want to be respectful of people's time because we have literally hundreds of Medium Day talks scheduled in addition to this one, and I know many people, if not most, have signed up for multiple talks and might want to jump onto the next one at 10:30. But I do have one last question for you, which is, what advice would you give to other Medium writers or people thinking about writing on the platform, and are sort of inspired by your success?
It may sound slightly corny, but it just can't be about you, right? Like if you're just writing because you think something is cool, it's kind of good luck to you, right? I think you really have to write for somebody. You have to think about somebody and say, what could make, you know, their life better, their ideas clearer, whatever. What would they like? Right. I ran a business school for 15 years. Lots of people who are business people like to go to business schools to teach students, right? They think it's a cool thing and whatever. And they fell into two buckets during my time. One was, I want to teach because I like teaching. And another bucket is, I want to teach because I love students. The superstar business person from, in that case, like Bay Street, our Wall Street, and who came up in the first category, no matter what their resume were, no matter how entertaining they thought they were, whatever, they failed miserably. Like miserably. You couldn't get them booked for a second class because the finance area would say never, right? The people in the second class was just a giant victory because they were enjoying themselves. The students loved it. It was a nice supplement to the tenure stream academics. So these people with more practical, real world wisdom, but it all depended on their attitude. And I would say the same thing here. I think I've been relatively successful, I guess, on Medium because I really care about what the audience wants to hear. And every once in a while, I write something that's a bugaboo of mine, a bee in my bonnet, and it always is like gets half the views that my average piece would get. And then I reminded myself, Roger, it's about them. It's not about you. So that would be my number one piece of advice. If you make it about them and how you can help them, they will like you and they will read you.
I love that. Yeah. And it's about value, offering people value, and that can mean a million things. Writing something that moves people can be valuable to people,
yes,
as well as
absolutely.
Writing something that informs people, but one way or another, it's got to
inspires people,
all
clarifies for people. There, I would agree, John. It's not one vector. There are many, but it's gotta emanate from them.
Yeah.
What impact you want them to have in their life from having read your thing. If you do that, I think it's awesome. So thank you to Medium. It's been a great place for me, and I hope I'm the Lou Gehrig of Medium. Back to my Wally Pipp. For those that are not baseball fans, Wally Pipp was the starting first baseman of the New York Yankees. He had a headache one day and begged off for a game. They put youngster Lou Gehrig in at first base, and Lou Gehrig went on to have one of the most storied careers in the history of baseball, but importantly, played the next 2,130 consecutive games. And so I would like to just keep writing as long as I'm useful.
Well, we're super glad to have you in our lineup to torture the baseball metaphor, and we hope you'll keep doing it as well. And thank you again for taking the time to do this morning. Really appreciate it. For those who are interested, definitely check out Roger's books. A New Way to Think is his latest book, and you can find it wherever fine books are sold, as they say. So thanks again, Roger, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.